You're listening to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast with Jody Livingston and Chris Trent, episode number 91.
Welcome to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast, helping you survive and thrive in youth ministry. And now, your hosts, Jody Livingston and Chris Trent.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the show today. Thanks for tuning in and listening wherever you are and wherever this finds you. Thanks for making this podcast today a part of your day. If it's your first time listening, welcome to the show. We're glad you're here. And if you are a returning listener, part of the Longer Haul community, maybe even a member of the Super Secret Podcast Facebook group, we are glad you're here as well. Great episode today. Lots of things to talk about. Show notes will be found at thelongerhaul.com/episode 091. It's thelongerhaul.com/episode 091. If you enjoy the show, make sure you subscribe to it so you can get it each time it comes out, whether that's on Spotify or iTunes or Google Play or whatever your favorite podcast player is. Or you can just listen on the website too.
Good times. This is a good episode. We're going to probably do a shorter introduction today just because the episode is it's a pretty long one, but it's a really good topic on discipline. But just in case you're new, that's Jody doing all the intro stuff there. He's a youth pastor in California. I'm Chris. I'm a youth pastor in Atlanta, Georgia. And we love teenagers, and we're all about trying to help you experience longevity in youth ministry, both in your current church and then also if you feel called or choose to try to do this long term, giving you tips and ways to experience this long term so you don't get burned out. So hopefully we'll be a help to that. Want to be an encouragement to you for sure. Jody, how are you, man? You good? Life good in California? Here's what I know about Jody in California. He just every weekend currently is visiting VW things like they're going to like these big like shows with VWs everywhere, which they look pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, they look pretty cool.
They're pretty cool. Yeah, man. Yeah. I went to one this past weekend at Huntington Beach on the pier. There's like 110 Volkswagen buses on the pier.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
That's amazing.
That's great,
dude. You got to get your bus
like
fixed so we can do our world tour, man. We got to do our world tour. So
it's fixed. It's fixed.
I mean, it ain't fixed good enough for us to drive across the country in it, is it?
I'm not sure that it'll ever be fixed to that degree.
No, it's part of the deal because we're going to do a longer haul tour for the 5 people who love us. So
all 12 listeners.
Yeah. Good times. Hey, today's episode, really, we invited a friend back, Seth Buckley, who's a youth pastor up in South Carolina. Great guy. Has been doing this forever. So this particular topic on discipline, how to discipline kids and how to deal with that, huge. And he just thought it'd be helpful to have him. He was back with us on episode 41, I think it was.
81.
81. Well, yeah, 81.
So 10 episodes ago.
Me.
Remember, he started in the 80s. We started in the 90s.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But this is good. Yeah. Don't forget our sponsors, please. Listen, if you're right now in process of trying to maybe come up with some good ideas for graduation gifts for your seniors, YM360. They support us. They help us out. They are ridiculously good at what they do, but in particular, they've got some really great ideas on some book type things that you could give your seniors. And so check out their stuff. There's some actual blog type idea things that they've done recently for how to do seniors. And then also big time thanks to Ricky Smith and the Georgia Baptist Mission Board, really their student ministry area, for just what they're doing as far as they just love youth pastors and they're trying to encourage us by helping make this happen. Giving us some resources to kind of pay for all the stuff we have to pay for to do it. So big time thanks to them. So yeah, man.
If you end up heading over to YM360, be sure to use promo code Longer Haul. Save 20% on anything. No, not anything. Almost everything.
Yeah. So good times.
But we think you should try it on anything.
You could try.
Good. Yeah.
Well, anything else big for you, man? I know this is a short kind of deal. I think it'd be helpful though, because of the length of the episode, just to kind of
we'll just jump
less of our Chewy's talk and more. I still worked it in though. I still worked it in
every episode,
and more what we're talking about. So big shout out to Dakota for throwing out the idea. We mentioned him in the episode, but this was a good one. I really enjoyed the conversation for sure. So,
Yeah. And thanks also to Thomas Holt, member of the Longer Haul group there, who threw out a picture of Chewy just to kind of rub it in that I don't get to eat at Chewy's as much as you do. Chewy's the unofficial sponsor of this podcast.
Yeah, I know. We need them bad. So, I haven't been in a while. I should go today and send just pictures.
Well, post it on the group for me and for
Yeah,
Thomas.
I may go live from Chewy's. Should I go live? I'm doing
in the group.
Next time I go to Chewy's, it's going to be random. If I can, if the service, I don't know what I'm going to go live from Chewy's and just hang out with everybody for just a minute. And I may not get anybody on there, but I'll try it and just see what happens. So
that'd be fun.
That'd be hilarious. All right, my friend. Well, it's good. Hope you're doing
all right. We'll jump in here. Here's today's interview with Seth Buckley, all about discipline.
No, it's not really an interview. It's more of a conversation. More hanging out with us.
It's more of a conversation.
Yeah, it's more like he just joined. He joined the panel. Is what happened today. Yeah. So good times.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, here we go.
And now we're pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
Well, here we are, spread out all over the United States of America.
Coast to coast.
Coast to coast, literally. You got Jody way out in California. I'm standing in Atlanta in my office, and we've got a special guest today. Seth Buckley is back. What's up there, Seth Buckley? How are you, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? Doing great, brother. Glad to be with you guys.
Great. Living the dream in South Carolina. So how are things? Things good up there?
Yeah, good, man. I'm just enjoying the pollen. It's been awesome. Just finding Claritin D everywhere you look, man.
Yeah, the pollen. Yeah, nice. It's terrible. Jody, is pollen bad in California? I don't even know the answer to that. I'm not trying to be funny when I say that. I know pollen. I know technically pollen is everywhere, but
I live in the desert. No, I live in the desert.
Yeah.
So
for people that don't know what we're talking about, like literally, it coats your
Google
car.
it. You should Google that.
Like you can drag your finger over your car and draw pictures.
Yeah, if you actually think somebody painted your car. I mean, you go outside and I thought my car was red, and it's no longer red again. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's terrible. So, Seth, you serve at First Baptist Spartanburg there in South Carolina. Just a quick reminder now, you guys can listen back to Seth in episode 81. We did a brief interview with Seth, and today we've invited him on not so much as an interview, but more so just a voice in youth ministry saying, hey, jump in on this particular topic and your experience. What are some things that you've learned in this area? But Seth, First Baptist Spartanburg, how long have you served?
Yeah, 23 years this year, man, here at First Baptist.
That's amazing. Jody, how old were you when he started at First Baptist Spartanburg?
Do you want to go there already? He just got here.
Oh my God,
we're friends. It's rare. It's rare that I have. I'm going to go at it because it's rare that I have somebody older than me that I can pick on.
That's true.
So anyway, I'm excited about this topic mainly because it came out of a little bit organic, a little bit grassroots in the sense of on our podcast group that we have,
the super secret one.
The super secret that Jody often refers to as super secret podcast group. One of the guys on there, Dakota Melton, spoke up and was just asking for some insight on an issue that he's been struggling with, and just brought up this issue of, and really just said, hey, any chance y'all could discuss student disciplinary policies, degrees of discipline and or best way of redeeming the situation. And Dakota just said, hey, I'm new to full-time ministry and no idea other than what those above me encourage me on this topic. And he's really just struggling with this issue that I want to talk about starting out for the three of us here for a minute. Because Dakota, we're going to jump in this thing. Thanks for throwing that out there. And some other people threw out some questions related to that we're going to jump into as well later in the episode. But really what Dakota, I think, is saying is, what is the balance between grace, discipline, and being more worried about behavior than spiritual growth, like getting too worked up about behavior. Have you guys struggled with that over the years? Like getting too worked up about it or not worked up enough? What has y'all's experience been?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a little bit of that. And there's depending on your level of compassion, which some people are going to be really, really compassionate, and then others
-5 on the spiritual gifts test for me. -5.
Yep, me. And even on Strength Finder, it's like very bottom. And so, so for me, sometimes that's a little different. Like I have to be mindful of that. But I think so. When I first started working as an after-school counselor for a after-school program for teens, one of the things that I was really told early on, which has been super helpful, is, and it's not so much of mercy and compassion versus grace as much as role. And they would say, look, they've got friends and they've got parents. You don't need to be either. You need to kind of fit in the middle of that. And that's been really helpful as a guiding kind of principle. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always a struggle because you want every kid that can be there to be there. But at the same time, some kids,
Yeah, I know for me, starting out in ministry, I think that was probably one of the hardest things to balance because I grew up in a home where discipline was part of kind of the routine, and so there were expectations there of behavior and respect, and all of those kinds of things were in line with when I was growing up. And so when I began as a youth pastor, I had a lot of those same expectations, and I learned really quick that not every student in your ministry comes up with that same background. And so their idea of what discipline looks like and what you think it looks like, I mean, they could be two totally different things. And that's hard. I mean, I think that's when it becomes a challenge because the way you speak to a student, I mean, they may think you're speaking in Greek. When you're talking about respect and things like that, I mean, they have no concept of what you're talking about. Some students, and there are other students who get it right out of the bat. But early in ministry, that was a super big challenge.
Yeah, and as a guy for me, like I was the kid that was coming out of kind of the opposite. I was a little bit of the opposite of Seth, right? Like, I did not grow up in a disciplinarian home. Parents had divorced, and I was very independent. And I was very much, when I was 16 years old, I was very much acting out a lot of times. Like, I can't believe, some of the people tolerated the stuff I threw at them. But that played out though. Probably I was also in the early 90s when I jumped into ministry, and kind of and being kind of at a Baptist-y type church. I don't know if that plays into it or not. Maybe that's any church. Definitely struggled early on with trying to find that balance of, no, this is the rule. You got to play by the rule, and being almost too legalistic when that. I think what's interesting is here is, so Seth and you and I tend to be more the same generation and age-wise. Jody's a little bit behind us. Experience-wise, Jody's pretty close to us for sure. But I feel like in one way, Jody, you might be kind of middle of this right now, experiencing more lately. But here's my question. Do you feel like the age of the youth pastor impacts this as well?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Yeah, because I started at 18, so I was one of them. So for me
to come down as a disciplinarian looks really weird.
Yeah, it was hard, right? Because I would say the way I disciplined, at 18, 19 is different than how I discipline now. And in the sense of how I would approach a student or talk with a student, like, you kind of encourage almost as a peer with authority. It's like being on student council, or something like that, like captain of the team, versus now, I'm a parent of teens.
Yeah.
And so I think that has changed, and how I handle a situation is different. I think too, you kind of grow a bit in confidence as you get older and the longer you do it. And so you're not as, like, when I was super young, one of the things that I wrestled with a lot was whether you want to admit it or not, to a great extent, your identity and maybe how successful you feel at what you're doing is wrapped up in how well you feel they like you. You almost need validation from the students to feel like you're doing a good job. And now I don't. I don't care as much. I mean,
I think
of
that's
course
a
you want to
lot.
be
I think
liked,
that
but
is very much like
my
a
top
parent
priority
too.
isn't that
There are
anymore.
some
If that makes
parents
sense.
in our ministry that they want their child to, you know, just love them, and so I think they misinterpret that and saying, well, I need to give in to their demands, or just show them the constant state of grace, and overlook some of their, those faults. And then what ends up happening is that you have a student who never understands the beauty of boundaries. And I think that, for me, I think that was one of the things, growing up as a youth pastor. You know, that was one of the things that I valued, boundaries. And I had to, early on. I remember going to a Richard Ross conference, and I'm not saying that the conference was about discipline. It wasn't that, but one of the things that we talked about there was, you know, structure and organization, and how do you address some of the issues, and discipline was just one of those. And that's when I remember Richard saying the importance for young youth pastors to really partner with parents in your ministry early on, and value them, but also lean on them on times of discipline, and kind of have that at your back, so that it's not just the youth pastor incorporating his concept of discipline, but there's kind of an understood disciplinary model, and among the parents there, and they support the youth pastor, but they all kind of, it takes a village to raise a child concept. They're in there with you. And I guess it was my third year of ministry, second or third year of ministry. And that was kind of a big game changer when I saw the parents more as a resource in that area. And I will say this, it's kind of over the years. I mean, that was back, this is crazy, but that was back in the 80s. That was the early 80s. Um, I think one of the things that's attributed to the challenge of disciplining students today is how it's a similar challenge that teachers and administrators have in schools. There's been such a backlash over the last probably 10 to 15 years. And so teachers, coaches, administrators are limited as to how they can even discipline in the classroom or on the field. And in some ways, maybe, and there were some illustrations where it was overboard. I get that, but in many ways, we've actually hamstrung students, because they're not really sure where boundaries are. There's a mixed message.
Yeah, it's that old. Sometimes to get kids saved, you have to convince them that they're actually lost and they're actually bad, because so many people are telling them the exact opposite of that.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, you're good. You're a good kid. You're a good kid. You're a good kid. So I hear us saying, that for the folks that are listening, and guys like Dakota, they're just kind of getting rolling on this in a full-time capacity anyway. Be patient. It gets better with time. That over time, it's going to, that you'll develop more of a voice or more authority in this area to be able to speak, to your group. So be patient with it. That it does take a little time, but also, so I think all three of us would agree that as we've become parents and as we've built relationship with parents, and that becomes part of our tribe, this is easier then as well. Now, some folks listening are like, well, I'm not there and I'm not about to be there. Heck, I just like a girlfriend or boyfriend, but realistically, there's some of this, and I've said it, and I don't know if it's fair or not, but it's just true. The older you get when it comes to leading certain people and including disciplining kids, it just gets easier. And I can tell you, man, now, and some of the things we're going to talk about, I'm not trying to jump ahead, but like, man, in a bunk bedroom, at a camp, I'm coming at it as a dad now, not as a 23-year-old,
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
and it's just I have a different authority. I have a different authority in just even the way I speak to them. It just comes across as different.
I'll say this too, like, when I was saying a minute ago, even when I was super young, I think you have to discipline different then. So it's not that I don't know that it's better. One is better than the other. I mean, I think it gets easier as you get older, for sure. And as you become a parent, that becomes helpful. But you can't, I could not discipline at 18, 19, 20 like I do now and have been successful at that. So you have to I think you have to approach it with just where you are. And there, I think there's some principles that are really helpful that we can maybe flesh out. But I think don't feel like, I would say strongly, if you're like 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, and you're not a parent, don't try to be one.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's not effective either.
I would just like to acknowledge out loud too, and Seth, I'd be curious because you've been doing this longer than we have, and that's not a joke. That's just why we have you on here, actually. It feels too that the disciplinary problems that we're like the problems that are needing discipline now, like that has increased dramatically in the last 5+ years. That there's a higher level of challenges in the room, and I want to be really clear here, not make anybody angry at me. Sometimes it is discipline, or sometimes the problems are caused by kids that are really just acting out in an inappropriate way, and they're just being bad or whatever, But sometimes the problems we're dealing with in the room are kind of medical / disability, almost like in some ways. Think kids that are dealing with special needs or high levels of ADD or potentially being on the spectrum. And so then we need to have a different sensitivity, because we're not talking about Johnny, who's, a straight A kid and a great athlete and popular in his school, and he's just being a butt because he wants attention. But we're talking about a kid who's actually on meds and trying to focus and can't focus, right? I mean, you guys have these kids in your group too?
Oh yeah.
No, not here. We don't have any kids like that. I mean, all of ours. I usually speak for like 45 minutes to an hour each Wednesday, and they sit there with their Bibles and their notes in hands and just writing, and just it's amazing. I mean, no, I agree with you, man.
I think there's a culture, though. There is a culture that you build over time, right? So I think initially when you step into something like that, and I'm seeing this all fresh and anew, like stepping in, kind of establishing consistency, establishing those boundaries, establishing whatever. I think over time, as you build culture, it probably lessens from when you initially did get there. But I do think we're seeing, a ton more of those things.
Well, I remember one of the churches that I served before here. In that situation, there was the youth ministry. I think there was a lot of grace. There wasn't a lot of wasn't known for being a very disciplined, structured type deal, so when I got there, I picked up on that pretty quickly, that the environment there. I mean, on trips, kids pretty much did what they wanted to do. I mean, they were a lot of things that I would not allow on a trip had been done, and on previous trips, and there had been, like, hey, if you do this, you'll be sent home, and the kids would do that, and nothing ever happened to them, and so there were rules, but then there was they were never enforced, and so one of the first trips, the first summers, we were up in Massachusetts, and I'll never forget this. I mean, I had two of our lead guys, our senior guys, crossed the line on very definitive rules that we'd laid out that were pretty big, and I just remember when that happened. This was like, okay, this was the moment of truth, and am I going to be like it's been in the past, and like, well, guys, you shouldn't have done that, and I hate that, or we're going to follow through with what we said in the parent meeting. And my pastor was there, and I remember talking to him and saying, Pastor, this breaks my heart. I mean, because I love these guys, but I mean, there was rules, they understood it, and so on and so forth. And he said, no, I agree 100%. And I remember the phone calls to the parents saying, hey, would y'all rather us bust them down or fly them down? What would y'all prefer? And so we sent them home, and it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in ministry. But without question, over the next 5-6 years of my ministry at that church, that was a reference point. And Jody, you were talking about culture, that you kind of, create a culture through your leadership. And we did. And of course, when I came back, I immediately reached out to those guys to re-engage them and love them.
That's good.
And it was very,
that part's good.
And one received it and one did not. One was very bitter towards that, but one understood it, received it, and but it's that's the thing about it. I think a lot of times as a youth pastor, and Jody, I think had mentioned this earlier. You want kids to love you. I don't know of a youth pastor who wants the kids to not love you or respect you, but sometimes you're making decisions and you're saying things, and it's hard. You're saying hard things that they need to hear, and they're not going to like. But you've got to be able to do it and not let emotion be at the center of what you're saying. They need to hear that it's biblically sound and it's based in love and grace, but it's very clear what your expectations are. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's just a challenge.
So I think, and Chris, I don't know what you have. I don't want to jump ahead, but I think kind of in line with what we're talking about, I think there's a few things that I always point out to folks when I'm talking about discipline issues or this culture thing. You want to jump in like principle stuff?
I don't know what those things are. So I don't know whether or not they're jumping or not.
Okay. Well, so I think I'll say this, and then, if we need to back out and come back, we can.
Yeah.
I think first, it's important that we understand that everything's going to be motivated and come from a genuine desire that you want to see kids get it right and thrive and grow in their faith. We want every kid to do that. You also have to recognize and understand that you're responsible for the whole as well. And sometimes a situation or a student, even though you want that student to desperately get it and thrive, can compromise the entire group. And so that has to be taken into account. And then there's kind of three things. And Seth, you kind of summarized all these in that, and just in sharing your experience here. One, I think you have to have really clear expectations and boundaries. Everybody has to know what those are. You can't decide in the moment that crossed the line. They need to know ahead of time what those expectations, what those boundaries are. I think you have to be consistent in your practice and your follow through of those things. So we have always had a rule that they do not take, well, I say always, since students started carrying cell phones, it's always been a rule for us that you don't bring those to camp. Okay. And that's not a battle everybody fights, and some people don't care, but for us, that's a big deal. And the rule for us is if you bring it, we're sending you home, because that's just a really important priority for us. And like you said, I think it just takes that one time.
But you don't just take up their cell phone, you actually send the kid home?
Yeah. Wow. And we tell the parents up front. We tell the parents and the students, and before we load the buses, we say, listen, no devices or no phones. If you have it and you forgot and you have it on you right now, here's a bucket or a basket. You can stick it in here. We'll put it in the office and you can get it when you get back.
Okay. I've got to say this out loud though, just to be clear.
Yeah.
You've built up to that. I just want to make sure anybody listening doesn't get themselves fired right now. This is one of those get fired moments. Okay.
Sure.
And Jody, you know this, right?
Yeah.
And I admire that, and I hear you. And
my point is not that everybody should do that. My point is,
I know, but it's just an example though of when you're listening to us overall, what we're saying though, you can't just go out swinging tomorrow when you get to or the Sunday when you get to youth group or whatever.
No, you got to.
But you've got to. Yeah, you've got to be clear, because this is one of those things where, you built up to that over time, and and you also have to know your culture as well.
Yeah.
And
you got to have support above you on anything, right? But especially something like that. But I think, again, you got to be clear up front, explain. They're getting to know why the rule, parents need to understand why, whatever it is. And then you just have to follow through. But, you follow through one time, and that pretty much.
That part was huge, Seth, what
it.
you said earlier. The tone that you set, and I'll share one here in a little bit on one of the topics we're going to jump into in a second, but the tone that you set going forward, because once you've done that, whenever you stand up the next year at camp and you saying, just a reminder, guys, if you do this, it's going to, people are like, hey, and last year he really did send somebody home. So y'all better believe what he's saying right now, because he really will send you home.
Well, I think, one of the things, Josh McDowell, has said,
I love talking to Seth because all of Seth's reference points are always like Richard Ross, Josh McDowell. I love it. That's like
the sages. They're the sages. But Josh says, rules without relationships leads to rebellion. And if you come in with rules, and you're not really working to try to engage in relationships with the students, they're going to push back because they don't see it. They don't see your heart. And I had a Wednesday night. I'd probably been in ministry maybe 4 years, I guess. And maybe 5. Maybe this was year 5. And I was teaching. I was right in the middle of Bible study, and one of my senior boys was on the back row, and he was kind of like, everybody knew him, and he was funny, but he was kind of like the guy that everybody knew, and Billy was just wouldn't stop. And I just, picking or saying something or whatever. And I said, Billy, I just said, hey guys, y'all just, y'all hold it down. And they looked up, and then a few minutes later they kept on going. And then I called Billy out. I said, Billy, let's, trying to stay dialed in here, man. And I kept on teaching. Well, probably 5, 6, 7 minutes later, it was just an obvious. The whole back row, he was just kind of going to town. I looked straight at him. I said, Billy, I need you to leave. And he looked at me like deer in headlights. I said, I need you to leave. I need you to get up and leave now. And I waited. And it was a moment. And he got up and left. And I finished teaching. And, of course, it was one of those moments in the room. It was like, man, it was really tense. And so after we finished, I remember like, okay, I love this kid. I really do. And so I called him. I called him as soon as I got home, and of course this is pre-cell phone, by the way. And he answered the phone. I said, "Yeah, oh gosh, you're bad." I said, "Billy," I said, "This is Seth," and basically I said, "Billy, dude, first thing I want to tell you, man, is I love you and I need you." I said, "You are a born leader, and people they're drawn to follow you, and I just see your influence in a powerful way in our student ministry, and I need your help." And I said, tonight you chose to use that influence in a way that was more of a distraction, but I'd love to talk to you about how we can use that in a way that you become the guy that leads our youth group to just really make a difference in our community, man. I really need your help. And I said, can you come by and see me after school tomorrow? And he said, yes, sir. And I said, okay, good deal, man. Well, he comes by, and this is a good story. Okay. So this is one of those things where God allowed that moment, and he really stepped up to the plate, man. It was well, I wasn't going to say that.
Billy Graham. Okay. Is that right?
And he wrote books, and okay. You know, and what I'm saying is,
Right, okay. Right.
because I genuinely loved him,
Oh my gosh.
I wanted to redeem that situation, but there's probably other situations where I was not that aggressive, where I disciplined a student, and they were
Yeah,
annoyed.
yeah. And they didn't receive it the same way, and they were done with you.
Yeah, no, and they didn't come back, and
Yeah,
and
I've got those kids as
and
well.
that hurts,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
Those are the things I remember. I remember their faces, and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
how
I
could I
think the
do that?
important thing is the follow up, and that was the other thing I was going to add is like too many times we discipline and we just leave it, and we never circle back to try to resolve or whatever. And I think, well, I don't know what you guys found in it, but it sounds like Billy Graham there was the same when he was a boy. A lot of times, those kids that are acting out, they have incredible leadership qualities. They just don't know it yet, and they don't know how to use it. And so, one of the things that I try to do is just find those kids and give them a job. I try to put them in charge of something.
Yep.
And that a lot of times that does wonders.
Yeah.
Kind of on the positive side of things, but
Yeah.
I think that follow up is the part that most miss, and I think it's the most important.
I think that
And it's not a one time thing, right? I mean, that's sometimes you got to keep pursuing after the fact, keep reinforcing, and you can't always be. I had a kid once; his name was Tyler, and he he was always in trouble, And I remember one day, man, it was just like, I don't know, it had just been a rough day for Tyler, and so his mom comes to pick him up, and I had a conversation with him that day, and I said, Tyler, what in the world is it going to take, man, for you to like stop cutting up all the time and like use your powers for good, kind of thing? And he said, I just want you to tell my mom when I do well.
wow.
I said, what? That's it for real? Like I can do that. And so, well, let's start over right now. We'll start over, and we'll make a point to do that. And so his mom comes, we walk out to the car. She rolls down her window of her car, and I said, hey, I need to talk to you about Tyler. And her response was, what did he do this time?
What'd he do?
And I said, you know what? Tyler actually had a really good day today. And man, he was great. And she just starts bawling. And Tyler comes to the car. He sees mom crying, and he immediately thinks we've, said that he did a terrible job today. He messed up again. And you could see it in his body language, man. He just sinks, And said, Tyler, man, we told your mom what an awesome day you had, and just thanks for being, helpful today. And that was it for that kid, man. Now, listen, he wasn't perfect. He still had bad days, but for Tyler, that was a huge momentum swing because everything was always negative. No one ever really spoke anything into that situation was positive, and it was a single mom situation, no dad. She had her hands full. And he went from being like this big problem kid to one of the best leaders that we had, just because we acknowledged what he was doing well.
Jody, that's a powerful, that word, and going to the single parent thing. A lot of the boys that I have some of the issues with, not all of them, but there's a good number that have come from a single parent situation with their mom, and so mom is doing the best that she can and trying to do all that she can, and has the challenge sometimes of trying to be the disciplinarian, and which can be a challenge. But I remember one night there was one of my boys. It was after one of our trips, and the kids were calling their parents or whatever to come pick them up, and this guy, he was a junior in high school, and his dad had died probably 8 years earlier. And mom, she was doing all that she could, man. She was really just a precious lady. And but Corey just, I was walking by the phone. He was on the phone with her, and he said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah," and I just stopped in my tracks, and I said, "Corey, who's that on the phone?" He says, "My mom." And I said, "Cover the phone up just for a second, if you can." if you can cover it now, let me just preface this by saying this kid loved me and he knew I loved him. Okay. I mean, many times I'd carry him home. I mean, I loved this kid. And he covered up the phone and I said, Corey, if I ever hear you say yeah or no to your mama again, it's not going to be good. That is a precious lady. And you better say yes, ma'am, till the day you die to your mama. Do you hear what I'm saying? He said, yes, sir. I said, you show her the respect she deserves because she's doing all that she can. And man, just love on her that way. Can you do that for me? He said, yes, sir. Well, dude, that moment, I just put my arm on him and I just looked at him and smiled. I said, I love you, Corey. He said, yes, sir. So I walked on up the hall and I heard I heard him on the phone and he said, yes, ma'am. And the moments with the single parent kids are critical because I think it goes beyond even the youth group. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's not so much discipline as much as it is modeling, respect, which ties into the discipline, because they may not see it at home. And it goes back to the relationships, though. You got to love these kids. I mean, Jody, the way you approached that mom, and she saw you, and you said that, but then the way you just said, "Man, Tyler had a good day today." I mean, she knew right then that you loved her son, and and there's no substitute for that.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's good.
Yeah,
It's good.
I think it's important.
So I think
well, I was going to say too, just along the parent thing, real quick, Chris, is when you're talking to a parent about an issue you've had, I think it's important to recognize, especially if you're not a parent, because I don't think you realize this. It's really hard as a parent when you're being told your kid has done something wrong, not to take that really personal, and especially and feel like it's your fault, and even though you're not accusing that parent of something, it's just really hard not to feel that. So I think it's really, I've always tried to be, when I'm dealing with the parent in a discipline situation, if I can, I try to have the student tell the parent what happened instead of me. And so instead of me coming out and going, Seth, let me tell you what your boy did today. Man, he was cutting up and not listening. And then he said that immediately that kind of puts, even if the parent doesn't get defensive, it puts you and the parent against the kid, or the student. And sometimes that's not helpful either. So I'll usually, come and say, hey, Chris, tell your dad what happened today. And what that does is it kind of removes me from the situation. I'm not in the middle anymore. And it helps me kind of frame the conversation in a way that is healthy and helpful for both the student and the parent. Because if you're not careful, you'll come out frustrated and you just kind of unload on a parent of what their kid has done. And most of the time, man, those parents, look, they're doing their best. There's some parents that aren't, but most parents are doing everything they can think of to figure out how to raise this kid. And you can sometimes do a lot of damage just in how you approach following up with a parent on a discipline situation. So, yeah.
And outside looking in, let me just say this about what the two of you guys are saying and the stories you're all telling, because they're amazing. And I just want to make sure our younger, and this is not an age discriminatory, I don't mean this as an age joke thing here at all, but I just need I think this is accurate to our younger youth pastor friends that are listening. There is a little bit of wiring potentially for our younger generation to think more instantaneous with these type of issues. And this is one of those huge issues that we just have to realize this takes time. There's not a magical fix to discipline issues, but it's ongoing, building relationships, follow up. There's not like a one trick that you can do with this one kid and that kid never gives you a problem again. Now, eventually you might get to where the kid is shaped up and learns the rails that you've established for him or whatever, or for her. But typically, this is going to take a little bit of time. And too often in our instant culture, we think, man, we just want a quick solution for this. We want to be able to throw a rule out there on Wednesday night or on Sunday mornings or on that event that automatically just makes this where I don't have to deal with this, or I don't have to get in the mud with this thing, but it takes time. So
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful just for us to maybe highlight some of the areas that most youth pastors live in, and just give any just basic tips, though that we've learned, little things to help out along the way. So I'll throw out some topics here and you guys jump in. I'll start and I'll give an example of what I mean just to kind of set the tone. So while speaking, for instance, how do you discipline while speaking? So for me, a little trick I've learned is, I use I give them the walkover teach to them. That's where I start typically. I'm standing on stage and I pick up that in that back left corner, I've got a couple knuckleheads being knuckleheads. And so typically what I'll do is I'll not literally walk right up to them, but I'll walk towards that side if I'm on stage, or walk towards that side of the room, and I'll just sort of teach in their direction. Now, to be fair, that's after 20 something years of reps, on stage. When you're just getting started, maybe that's a little bit harder to stay focused and not lose and all of that. But I do the walkover. I give them the walkover, and I give them the nod, and I may even give them a second walkover if it's not getting any better. But I would also say this when you're speaking, and this is really hard, but don't be afraid of silence. When you've got a room that you've got a couple kids talking, now it depends on, man, if you got 10 kids in the room versus 30 kids versus 200 kids, it depends on the room, right? But don't be afraid of silence. It's okay every once in a while to stop talking, and people will realize that they're waiting. And don't do it smugly. Don't be all smug about it. But people will realize that you're waiting until everybody, and typically, not all the time, but typically they'll police themselves in that moment. Or if there's some kid being a knucklehead or whatever, they'll police themselves. But then I will say, as far as when I'm speaking, I will get to the point. If I've given them the courtesy walkover a couple times and a stare and a look,
the dad stare,
and I've given them the silence, kind of let, and they just still insist on they've decided they're going to draw the line in the sand with me, I'll call them out.
Yep.
I'll say, and typically it's never just one kid. So you're able to call out a section. Hey, there's a couple folks back here. Listen, guys, I just need you guys to reel it in. And I've even gone as far as to say, hey, look, I've kind of walked over a couple times, but you guys are still, can y'all help me out and just really reel this thing in? And so as far as like when speaking, that's one thing I've learned. You guys learned any tricks while you're speaking, besides kicking them out of the room, Seth? I typically don't do that anyway. I have kicked kids out of the room before, to be fair. I really have, but it that's like a last, and I'm very rare. Like a last chance.
Well, we just passed our new budget here, and we've just instituted. We got $100,000 disciplinary budget, which is we're using to paying kids to be good. So we're really excited.
Blah blah blah. So you got like a comedic side there, man. Like we should bring you on just for comedy there. So.
Oh man. No,
says the guy. Seth does have. I went and did a thing at Seth's church recently, and Seth, you would be honest to say that you are blessed with an amazing youth building, and you're blessed with an amazing youth building. But dude's got an airplane in his building, like a literal airplane in his building.
Dude, and you said that like 137 times that day.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, when you were describing yourself talking, I was like, wait, is he like on the stage with me or something? Because
is that your style?
Absolutely, dude. I mean, absolutely. I'll come off the stage and kind of walk around, but I kind of head over to that side, and like you said, once or twice, and the look, the whole deal. And honestly, normally 90% of the times it's guys. Not there's still girls that do that, but 90% of the time it's guys. And so I just say, hey fellas, I need y'all to dial it in, and usually that's the case. But then we have several adults in the room. And the way it's kind of set up, they can kind of easily just move in. One of them may come down just to sit down near them and kind of have a presence. But yeah,
Then I think what you do there is, and once you've done that a couple times, and you still have that one guy or that one girl or one group of friends that are habitual, that's when you talk to them afterwards.
That's right.
But this goes back to, there's not a quick fix on this type of stuff.
Yeah.
You have to deal with it over time.
Yeah.
Jody, any before I move to the next one, anything speaking that you've learned that would be worth?
No, I think that's pretty similar. We try to encourage, if we have, leaders in the room, to spread out in general, and you kind of know who those kids generally are going to be anyway. And so we have them kind of strategically sit near them. But
Okay. So good. That's great. Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you. My bad. Okay. How about this then? Small group setting. Think like we would call that, like in Baptist World Sunday School. I know it's not just a Baptist thing, but like a Sunday school setting. Anything we've learned in that setting, and how do we equip our volunteers also with this issue?
Yeah, so I have a process that we talk through with our leaders generally, just so that we're disciplining consistently across the board. And so okay,
friends, don't miss this right here. This is going to be big right here, what Jody's about to say.
Wow, man,
the process and training.
Now
the pressure's on, Jody, but I think I know what you're going to say.
It's actually not that.
Just key into this, because it's that moment where you're training your people and you're getting on the same page. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first time it's hey guys, can you please not do that? So please don't, is how we would say that. Then the second time is, hey, I've asked you not to do that. If you do it, then this is going to happen. And then the next time is, since you've done this, now this is going to be. And so the reason we follow that is, the first is kind of that warning, or just, hey, please stop. The next one explains the consequence that's going to follow. So it helps them process through the action to the consequence, especially for our junior high kids. That's difficult for them. And then the third that is really important, I think, for me, is like, since you've done this, now whatever. And what that does is it puts the responsibility on the student for their actions and not the leader. And we find if all of our volunteers are generally following the same process, using the same pattern, same process, then that helps a ton and it helps them be consistent, know where the boundaries are. It helps the student be consistent, know where the boundaries are. And I don't ever want to put our leaders, or myself for that matter, in a place to be the bad guy, right? And I want our students to be able to own and take responsibility. So that's kind of the process that we would generally walk through on that.
And what's huge here as a youth pastor, here's what I'd like for folks to hear. So then your job is to bring people to the center of that, because you're going to have some leaders that are too loosey-goosey, want to be a friend to the kids and never discipline at all.
Yeah.
And lets the kids get away with anything. And then you're going to have some that are ready to ship them off to another country, into child labor or something crazy, like they're just ready to be done with them completely. Yeah. It's like they're ready to just kill them. And so trying to bring them to center. But if you've established that and all agreed on that, that's huge.
That's good. Yeah.
Seth, anything to add to that kind of setting, or is that you kind of line up with that? Because I'm going to the next one here, unless you've got something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say very similar. That it's to not. My biggest thing that I tell leaders is to not knee jerk, and to let emotion dictate their response. I mean, that's just you got to do. Yeah.
Yeah. How about this setting then? Any tips that we could share with our folks, like a bunk bed type setting, like a cabin at camp, so you're off at camp and you're trying to get all the guys or the girls to go to sleep at night, and nobody wants to go to sleep, and it's just chaotic, and you need sleep, but yet everybody's going nuts. Or maybe you are at a conference and you've got a bunch of hotel rooms and kids won't stay in the rooms and all that type of stuff. I've got something there, but you guys have anything?
I wake them up really early the next morning.
So yeah, so our former, our student pastor, that's what he did. He was like, I can stay up later than you and I can wake up earlier than you.
Yeah.
And you will be getting up early and you will pay the price. Yeah, that's
good.
I'd go back, when you talked earlier about when you sent the kid home, I wouldn't say I'm going to send a kid home in this, but I established early on a fair policy, what I consider fair, where I just kind of use this because I used to be the yelling youth pastor.
Yeah.
I mean it. Go to sleep. I mean it.
Right
Stop talking.
now.
You know, and I used to be me. I'll fully admit that. Somewhere along the lines, though, I learned the power of free time, and I didn't overreact. I just took a couple guys that were being knuckleheads and would not be quiet, and I said, "Hey, listen, I've told y'all. I've gave you a couple warnings. Listen, if you say one more word, I'm going to take away some of your free time tomorrow." And they said something, and I took away some of their free time. And I didn't take the whole day. I didn't overreact because, listen, if they've only got 3 hours of free time, and you take away 30 minutes of free time, and they're sitting there watching everybody else play,
It's like,
you don't have to literally set them in a chair and make them watch it. But you know what I mean?
time out
They
for
know
big
they're
kids.
missing out.
You put the dunce hat on them while they're watching.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go that
Wall
far.
squats.
That might not fly in this world. But all I'm saying is this: once you've established that, yeah, you really will take away that.
Yeah, I think it's about follow through, right? And that's the thing. And
it's all about follow
because
through.
I want to be clear, like I don't send kids home for everything, right? Like, but there are some things that
just bringing technology that everybody in the green world has. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Some things we have, I think that's being clear off the front, and regardless of what it is, I don't think I think that's important not to knee jerk, like Seth said, and recognizing every kid is different. Like, and as a parent, that if those who are listening are parents, you'll know this. Like, I cannot discipline my oldest the same way I discipline my second. And I can't discipline my third. I've got 4 kids. They're all so different. So sometimes, and that's what makes discipline tricky, is like some kids, you just have to look at a certain way and you've crushed their world. Another kid, you could hold him underwater till the bubbles stop and he's still going to get up and, smart off. So you just have to recognize that every student is different, and you really do have to approach kind of every student differently to a degree. And some are going to require more patience. And look, the reality is, as unfair as it seems, some kids are going to be able to get away with a little bit more than others at times, right? And it's not that it's unfair or you're moving the needle. It's just, man, what qualifies as a great day for what qualified for a great day for Tyler, for example, I was talking about, would not be a great day for Alice, right? Who never did anything wrong. And so but the goal, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. The goal is I'm working from a place where I desire for every kid to get it and grow. And that means I have to meet them where they are and grow them to where they should be. And so because that starting line moves a lot in general with where they are and what their home situation is like. And that means that the discipline line is going to move a little too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. A couple more here, just jumping into real quick. Ashley Kennedy on our group brought up PDA and dating. Seth, learned anything when it comes to how you're dealing with that these days? If they're crossing lines, sneaking out, making out, anything like that?
On our high school mission trip, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm actually being serious. We carry a large group up to Kentucky for our mission trip, and one of the things that we do on that trip is we say, okay, from the moment we get in our vehicles to travel up there until we come back to the church parking lot, there are no relationships in existence. You don't have a boyfriend, you don't have a girlfriend. We're serving the Lord, and so for these next 7 days, you're not going to worry about he said, she said, sitting together. We want you engaging with the people we're going to minister to and with your mission team that you're assigned to. And that way you're not concerned about, Tommy didn't speak to me this morning, or Tommy didn't, give me a kiss after chapel, or, is he mad at me, or vice versa. And what we've done is we've tried to, obviously I didn't do that my first year. I had to kind of walk into that. But one of the things that happened as a result of that is now our students understand that when we go, not just on the mission trip, but in our ministry, that sometimes relationships in middle school and high school can get in the way of our relationship with the Lord, because it's we're placing too much value on each other. And so our leaders consequently as a result of that, talk about the importance of, um, you know, how we carry ourselves with the opposite sex, and if you're in a relationship, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
It's
And
good.
so
Y'all set that tone on the front end of the trip, which to me is the key of all of that.
it is, and I mean, I had you know, two of my boys. I have four boys, and two of my boys had to actually go through that experience on the trip their senior year, uh, and had, I mean, sweet girls. I mean, they were precious girls, and but they honored that, and it was cool. I watched them. They were engaged with their mission team, and they were not having to sit together and hold hands, because we don't allow the holding hands or any of that kind of stuff. They're not sitting together during the chapel service at night. And it allowed them. And I asked them after it was over, I said, "What was that like for you guys?" And they said, "Well, it actually made me appreciate my relationship more. With their girlfriend, they learned to treasure that, but also they learned how easy it is to miss out on other things if they put too much focus on it."
It's good.
The PDA thing. I mean, the PDA police. I mean, we have those. I mean, where you just come up and just lovingly say, "Hey guys, it's just little sunlight between the bodies here. We don't make a huge deal out of it, but when they're sitting arm in arm during worship service, I heard one pastor say one of the greatest signs of hypocrisy is a boy sitting beside a girl with his arm around her, singing the song "All That Thrills My Soul Is Jesus."
Oh wow!
And
Was that Billy Graham crusade?
yeah, that was actually Billy Sunday.
Okay.
Let's go back into the 20th century.
Oh my God.
But that I think that there has to be that consistent reminder to the kids. Hey, listen, there's some things that
Good.
just aren't appropriate.
Yeah. I like it. I have at least we're this is a long episode, and I want to make sure. But there are a couple more things I think I'm going to keep pushing us through, if that's okay. So Ashley, that was a great question. Thanks for jumping into there. Holly Peck mentioned, how to handle disruptive kids that need Jesus, so you don't push them away. And I feel like we've covered that. We talked about that a lot. But one thing she did bring up was the phone issue.
Yeah.
And Jody has given us the extreme version of what to do there.
Look, though, for us, it's the same. It's the same thing.
I'm just, don't explain it again. We totally get you. I'm just messing with you. I promise. I get it. But that's it. That's on a trip.
Yeah.
But what about just on a Wednesday night? What about on a Sunday? Right. So I think, I just want to pitch one idea here that I have found not to be foolproof, but to be effective. And it's simply this. Sunday mornings, Wednesday nights, a lot of times when we get ready to dig in to the word or to the moment, one is, I think it's important to say out loud, "Hey, man, we just want to have a great time of worship tonight. So, hey, I'm going to ask you, man, not to distract your friends. And also, look, can we just all, for the next 45 minutes, can we just put our phones in our pocket and not? And just keep it out there, right? Not acting like cell phones are the devil, but just simply saying, hey, I'm casting that vision. Does that mean there's not going to be of course there's going to be a kid that just still breaks that rule, right? But I'm casting the vision and setting the tone over time. But here's another part of it that I think is huge is we often, before a big Bible study moment, like on a Sunday morning when we're standing in the room and our kids and we're about to dig into the word, instead of me just praying for the group and before we read the word, I ask them to pray. Now, not out loud, but just simply to say, hey, man, in your heart, in your soul, I mean, you pray. And I just want to guide you in a couple things. And I'll actually say to them, and one of those is often, God, help me. I want you to pray. If you're willing, this is a bold prayer. You got to be willing to do your part. But I want you to pray, God, help me to hear what it is you're trying to say to me today. God, help me to not be a distraction to my friends. And then I say to them, and I actually ask them, and then I say, and God, help me to not be distracted by my friends, by my phone, or anything else in the room, right? And so I actually ask them, because I want them to own that, and I want to help them understand, look, I'm not anti-cell phone, Jody, I'm just kidding. Again,
I am.
sorry, I couldn't help it. I'm not anti-cell phone. I'm just saying, hey, let's all acknowledge that we could really be distracted. We really want to just give God this time, Again, is it foolproof? No, I'm not proposing that it's foolproof. But here's what I am telling you. Here's what I believe. It's getting at the heart of what we really need to be helping our students with. And that is not setting rules for them in that moment with the cell phone, but rather creating moments that they start to wrestle on their own on what's appropriate when it comes to using them and finding those moments. And I'm telling you, man, it seems like a lot of times God honors that, And so, just casting that vision there. So,
I think there's two things I would say. One is,
send them home.
Kick them out of the room.
I'm sorry.
Call their parents. No, one is to a large extent, I think the cell phone technology thing is something that we're seeking to redeem in kids' life, not necessarily reject, because they can't reject it. And so giving them maybe some healthy ways to utilize the phone. And I know that's not necessarily in the room in the teaching scenario, but just in general, are there helpful apps like the YouVersion thing or the Read Scripture app or that maybe, can help them when they're beyond the room, kind of learn how to redeem that. The other thing is, and I see this a lot, you cannot pull out your phone and read scripture from your phone on stage and then get mad that kids are on their phone in the room. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that in theory of like reading scripture from your phone or anything like that. I will readily admit, I think there's something different about reading scripture from a Bible on stage. I don't think it's sinful to do anything otherwise. I just think as a good practice, it makes it clear where that's coming from. The authority feels like it's coming from something other than a phone. But you can't get up, use your phone from the front of the room or the stage the whole time and then get mad that they're on their phone when you're teaching. So I think you just have to be mindful. I think that's a clarity thing. If you're setting those boundaries and the expectations and you're wanting to encourage them to do that, you're explaining the why, but then they see you turn around and pull out your phone. They're not, I mean, you're kind of undercutting everything you're doing. So I would that's just something I usually just try to be mindful of.
Agreed. Wrap up with this. Seth, how do you deal with the biggies? Drugs, those type of things, the big things that we do, like what if it's a big major line cross moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think some of the things that I've had to deal with where I've actually had to engage law enforcement, I think going back to words we said earlier, the follow through, because there's some issues that are beyond your ability to discern and decide what you want to do. You're kind of forced.
Or to show grace in.
What's that?
Or to show grace in because it's a violation of the law. And
That's right.
It's not up to you to show grace.
Well, I had a parent one time. We had removed a student from a leadership role because of their there was engaged in alcohol. They acknowledged it. It was a huge party. I mean, it was just a really difficult situation. And so we removed them from a leadership role on one of our mission teams because we break our students up into mission teams, and and so the parent came and they couldn't understand why we did that, and they wanted to they began to engage in the conversation of, is it wrong for if it's in a parent's house, why the whole alcohol issue. And that's when I shared with him. I said, I need to make sure you understand that actually this is a violation of the law. It's illegal for anybody under the age of 21 to drink, and so that's illegal. And so it's an illegal activity that I can't show grace in that respond of leadership, because we made that as part of the leadership pact. I mean, they signed a covenant going in, knowing that if they engaged in any of these things, they couldn't be a leader. They were forfeiting that right. But I think having clear expectations, even though they're obvious, drugs, alcohol, whatever, that you follow through with doing what you said you're going to do, but also it's the ministry that takes place after the decision that you've got to still reach those kids and minister to them. And one of which, having to go and sit, in prison with one young man that made a decision that was, I hated it. It was horrible, but our relationship, even to this day, is still a sweet relationship because he had made a poor choice, and I had to follow through with that. But it's it's the relationship afterwards, follow through that you got to do.
Good. That's what you got to do. Well, I think this has been good. Hopefully, it's been helpful to folks. Yeah. Anything else that we didn't cover that you guys want?
Let me say one thing, Chris. You're going to mess up in a disciplinary situation. You're going to make the wrong decision. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you're going to handle something wrong. And the thing that we have to pray for is that God directs our emotions and our motives, and that our motives are pure and to honor Him, and our goal is to point them to Christ. And there sometimes we may overreact. We handle something poorly, and it can cause and send mixed messages. And if you do handle something wrong, and you know that, then I would also say you need to own that, and you need to address that if you did overreact, but then in the overreaction that you share your heart as to why. I don't know if that makes sense, but if you handle something and you feel like you went way overboard, it's the same thing as a parent. If a parent disciplines and they maybe overreacted, I think it's always important for a parent to come to their child in that situation and say, you know what, I think I overreacted. I let the emotions get the best of me, and I still did not want you to do what you did, but my discipline didn't fit the situation, and I was wrong. And so I just want to throw that out there, and that being authentic and genuine and transparent is a good thing all the way around.
Yep.
Good.
I like it.
Well, this has been good, Seth. Thanks for joining up. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening today. Don't forget our sponsors. Hey, check this out, Seth. We have awesome sponsors, man.
Come on, man.
First of all, YM360. They sponsor us. They help us out, Youth Ministry 360. If you're looking for grad gifts here in this final days, those are the guys to talk to about that. They've got some amazing things that could help with that. So YM360, and also thanks to the Georgia Baptist Mission Board for Ricky and his team supporting us as well, because they love youth pastors. So sounds good.
Yeah, man. I think that's it, right?
I think that's it. Cool. Yeah, let's wrap this thing up. Seth, thanks for hanging out with us, man. We appreciate it.
It's been great being with you guys, man.
Awesome. Good times.
We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast at www.thelongerhaul.com.